Today's story is about my 5-year-old friend, Ahmad, and his journey with childhood apraxia of speech at the preschool level and our speech therapy journey for helping him learn some words and discover how to find his voice via AAC. So, welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Carrie Clark, speech language pathologist, and I'm going to be sharing with you Ahmad's story today. And as we do that, I'm going to be talking through the different aspects of the Speech and Language Kids framework that we used in order to support Ahmad on his journey to learning how to speak and learning how to communicate with all of his friends and peers. So, welcome to the podcast. Hey, Francine, welcome. All right. As you know, I record these live inside the Hub. So if you would like to join me on the next recording of the Speech and Language Kids podcast, you can come over to hub.speechandlanguagekids.com. You'll also be able to find all of the checklists and screening tools that I'm going to be talking about today as we talk through Ahmad's story. Hey, Cecilia. Hey, Jenny. Welcome. All right, you guys should be able to find the chat there, so you can pop over there and ask questions as we go along. Hey, Kami. Okay, so let's talk about my friend Ahmad. And yes, I am changing names. I always change the names when I talk about my past clients. But Ahmad was a 5-year-old boy with childhood apraxia of speech. And if you are unfamiliar with childhood apraxia of speech, that is a motor speech disorder. So that means his brain knew what he wanted to say and sent the message to his mouth to say it. And somewhere along that journey between his brain and his mouth, the signals get crossed. The wires don't connect, and they are not able to pronounce those words, those sounds the way that they want to. And so what this tends to look like is it might look like every time they try to say something, it comes out different and it sounds nonsensical because it's not the right sounds that they were going for. Or maybe they have trouble getting the sounds out and getting them to connect with other sounds. So it might sound choppy or robotic. And so what we see with these children with childhood apraxia of speech is that it's really the motor planning and the motor processing that's getting mixed up. It's not their brain. They know what they want to say. They know how to say it. It's just the signal's not getting there. And that can be due to neurological damage, but sometimes we have no idea. Sometimes we don't know what causes apraxia, and it is just one of those things where brains develop differently, right? And there's so many ways that brains can develop, and so that is one of the things that sometimes happens. This particular child, he had childhood apraxia of speech, but he also had a whole slew of other developmental challenges due to some trauma from his past. So I know he was only 5, but he had a rough 5 years, and he had a lot of, he had reactive attachment disorder. So he had a lot of trouble with relationships with others. He had some damage to his intestines due to lack of food. So there was a lot going on for this little friend. And I wonder, looking back on it, I wonder if some of that neurological impact is what caused the apraxia, some of the trauma from his past. But sometimes we don't know, like I said. So he had apraxia, but he had great receptive language, meaning that he could understand everything that we were saying, and he could communicate with us in a lot of ways that weren't speech. He would be able to act something out or walk you over to it or, pantomime. He was able to get his point across very clearly when he needed to, but really, really struggled with the speech. He wasn't really able to get many words out at all. And one of the interesting things about apraxia is that certain words will get repeated over and over enough that that motor pathway becomes solid. And so they're able to use certain words and say them clear as day, and then everything else they say sounds jumbled or sounds choppy or doesn't make sense, right? So he had some words he could say, but not a consistent vocabulary yet. Okay, so I saw Ahmad at our Early Childhood Special Education Center, and so that was a preschool program specifically for children with severe disabilities. And so he went there for, I think that's a 3-hour program, 3 hours every day. And so we had, a group of kids that came in the morning and a group of kids that came in the afternoon, and the staff just stayed there. And this was really effective for him in particular and all the kids there because he had a lot of therapists that needed to see him and special educators and all of these other people, right? And so by having us all in the building and bringing the kids in for times where we could all kind of mill about and work with all of the children, we actually got to work as a team together with each other, which was my favorite part of that job because I learned so much from my physical therapist, my occupational therapist, my behavior specialist, my special educators, everyone in that building. We all shared knowledge, we all shared decision making, and it really was a very cool program. So that is the setting for Ahmad's story. Now you're all caught up there. So I'm going to walk you through our Speech and Language Kids framework as it applies to Ahmad. So I did not have this framework formalized when I saw Ahmad. This was years ago. And so I used many of these same pieces, but they weren't in this formalized structure. So hang with me as I kind of make this narrative fit the structure of the way we're teaching it now. But these are the steps that we took in deciding how to help Ahmad. Okay, so the very first part of our framework is to identify which areas of communication are impacted. So this happens through our formal assessments, through talking with the parents, through talking with the teachers, through our observations, all of these different ways that we can figure out what areas of communication are impacted. So for Ahmad, we had two that were the most impactful, right? He had a lot of areas that probably could use some work, but the ones I really wanted to focus in on were functional communication, so being able to communicate his basic wants and needs. And then the second one was speech, being able to speak and get those words out to be able to articulate what he wanted, okay? So those were the two areas that we narrowed it down to for communication. Now, like I said, he also had PT goals and OT goals and behavior goals and special education academic goals. We had a lot of goals for this friend, but those were the ones that I wanted to focus on for speech, for speech therapy, okay? So that's step one, is to identify the area of communication that's impacted. Step number two then is to drill down and figure out which specific sub areas or approaches we're going to use to address those larger areas. Okay, so for functional communication, I really needed this kiddo to have a way to communicate his basic wants and needs, to get those needs met in the classroom and at home. And so my suggestion was AAC. So AAC is augmentative alternative communication, and it's any sort of communication that they can use besides speech to communicate with us, okay? And so for this particular child, I really thought he would do well on an AAC device, which is, an iPad, a tablet, and it's got an app that has pictures. And they push the button for the picture they want, and it speaks a message, okay? This was a child who understood everything happening around him. He had a lot to say. So I wanted him to have more options than just, say, a picture board that only had 12. So that's what we were looking at, is could we introduce some sort of AAC? And fortunately, in this program where I worked, we had a whole cabinet of them all ready to go. And so we were able to check those out and try those with him during the therapy process. So that was the first section that we chose. So for functional communication. All right, I think we're still working. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we're back. All right. So going back to what we were choosing for functional communication, we were choosing the AAC pathway, which is helping them learn to communicate those basic wants and needs through AAC. And then the other piece that I wanted to focus on was speech. So looking at our different speech pathways, we have articulation approach, a phonology approach, an approach when a child is just mumbling. And what we chose for Ahmad was a motor speech approach. And so what that means is we are targeting sounds in shorter words. We are working on starting with just putting two sounds together, a consonant and a vowel, like go, instead of trying for a bigger word, because we know that kids who are having these motor speech problems, they need shorter words to practice first so that their brain and their mouths can get used to coordinating the speech and the movements to put two sounds together, and then we can build from there. Okay? So whereas a phonology approach, we might be looking at a class of sounds, or an articulation approach, we might be looking at a single sound. For motor speech, we're looking at word structures. So consonant, vowel, vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant. Okay? So that is the approach that we decided to take with Ahmad for that. So those were my two goals. We had AAC and motor speech. Okay? All right. So beyond the pathways, we then look at what are the specific skills we can teach to support those areas. So for AAC, we were looking at just starting off with communicating his very basic wants and needs in the classroom with an AAC device. And for the speech sounds, for the motor speech, I was starting with consonant vowel and vowel consonant words, just pairing two sounds together. All right? Any questions so far from the hub? You guys can pop those into the chat if you have questions. Okay, so let's talk about the therapy, right? That's the fun part. So that's the planning piece, right? That is, okay, I'm going to put together this big picture of what we're looking at and what we're going to work on. And that is going to guide our decision making. That is going to guide our process moving forward. So now filling in the gaps with what we actually do in therapy is the easy part, right? Having a system, having a framework you're following makes it so that you're not just guessing every single session. What should I work on today? Should we work on some of this? No, we've got a plan in place and we've got a path we're going to follow. And here's where we start. All right. So that's the beauty of the framework here. Okay. So starting on therapy, of course, nothing's as simple as it seems, right? I had this grand vision in my head of how this was going to go, and I immediately hit resistance from mom. And so the resistance from the parents on this one was the AAC device. And in this particular case, this child had reactive attachment disorder, and that comes with a lot of manipulation. So they are trying to manipulate the relationships around them because they don't trust. The trust was broken at some point in their life in those crucial years where they learn how to trust. And so it's not that they're making a choice not to trust, it's that that trust is broken in them. And so they are using manipulation in any way they can to get what they want and need because it's survival, right? And so the resistance from mom was, if we provide him this device to be able to speak for him, then what if he uses that as a manipulation to get out of doing the speech work, to manipulate the relationship with me or mom or teachers when we're asking him to speak, okay? So that was her perspective. My perspective was, if he could speak, he would, right? He physically cannot make these words form in his mouth. We need to give him a way to communicate. And I believed that would reduce the behaviors because he had a way to communicate with us, right? Okay, so two sides of the coin. Neither of us was wrong, okay? This is one of those situations where as a therapist, especially a young therapist, which I was, I thought I knew best. And my way was the highway. It was my way or the highway, and that's what I wanted. And I said, no, he needs to have this device, and he needs to have full access to it. And mom was looking at it from a very different perspective, but she was right too, okay? So when we are coming to the table with these clients and when we are looking at strategies we want to implement, we have to look at the whole picture. And we have to consider the family's wishes and the child's wishes and the teacher's wishes. Because even if you walk in and say, you know what, AAC is the way to go for this kid, this is what he needs, it's going to be perfect. If the teachers don't want to use it, if the parents don't want to use it, it's not going to get used. So it's a waste of everyone's time, and you're creating tension for no reason. Okay. So moving forward on that thread then. What we did was we called a team meeting, and we were lucky enough to have a behavioral specialist on our team who had a doctorate in behavioral therapies and specialized in children with reactive attachment disorder, which is amazing. And so she was able to come in and provide her perspective as well. We had conversations, we had discussions, we had negotiations, and what we came up with was a plan that everyone was okay with. And that was that he would be allowed to have the device and he would be allowed to communicate with that as needed. But the mom and the behavior specialist really wanted him to also repeat back what the device said, or at least try. And so that way we were able to come to a middle ground where he was still communicating using the device when he needed it, but then also practicing the speech to go along with it. And so that was us coming to the table and being willing to hear each other's sides and work together. We were able to come up with a plan that met everyone's needs. All right. So we did go with that plan. We had him using his device in the classroom. He very, very quickly picked that up. It was not a big deal for him at all because he had such good receptive language skills. He understood so well. It was easy for him to pick that up, okay? So that was almost set it and forget it. I was able to say, okay, here's this, show him how to use it. And he's like, great, got it. And that was it. Not a big deal. So that allowed me then to be able to change and switch my focus to working with him on the speech piece. So that is where we went on the motor speech pathway, and we started working on those consonant vowel and vowel consonant words. All right. So what does that look like? What that looked like for him, and what I recommend for all of my kids who are doing the motor speech pathway, is that we select those small words, those short words, but we select ones that are functional. Not a word they're never going to use in their everyday life. A word that they could use all day long. For example, go. Go is an amazing one because go could be used in a lot of different situations. Cookie, only going to be used if there's a cookie present. But go, a lot of things go. I could go, you could go away from me if I don't want that, right? There's so many ways that we could use words like go. And so we focused on what we call core words, which are core vocabulary that everybody uses every day throughout their day. And we chose ones that were one consonant and one vowel. Go or up, doing it the other way around, vowel first. And I don't remember what his first list of words were, but I selected a list of words, maybe 5 to 10 words that I wanted him to practice and then use throughout the day. And so I had my minutes with him, but he also was in this special education classroom, getting his minutes done there. He was working at home with mom. And so I gave everyone a copy of the list, and I actually posted the pictures of his words in his classroom right next to where he hung his backpack. And so another part of the motor speech, the motor learning process, is that small bursts of practice more frequently are more effective than longer bursts that are less frequent, okay? So instead of seeing them 1 hour a week, seeing them 5 minutes twice a day is more effective because we get that distributed practice, okay? So every time I would see Ahmad come off the bus, he'd be trucking it down to his classroom with his cute little backpack, I would follow him in and I'd say, Ahmad, welcome to school. So glad you're here. I would prompt him through hanging up his backpack because he needed some prompts. And then we would practice his words. So I would just walk him over and we would just go through and say him maybe 2 or 3 times through. And then he could go on to his welcome activity, whatever they had set up. Okay, so I did that every morning. I came back around the end of his session, the 3-hour chunk. I came back and did it again before he left when we're getting our backpacks and everybody's standing around waiting for their bus to be called. We hit him again then. And then he also had his regular sessions with me. So he got lots of practice with me working on those words throughout the week, but he also had the teacher using those every time they came up functionally in class and parents using them every time they came up functionally at home. And we would have him say those words and practice those words whenever those came up. So, he's on the swing and we're pushing him. We stop and we say, oh, do you want to go? Let's practice. Go. I hear the G sound. Listen. Go. And then he says go and we push him, right? I could have him say push, but we're working on go. So we're going to say go, right? And we practiced those words over and over and over until he got really, really good at those. And then we moved on to a new list. And then we did the same thing. And that's the thing with motor speech. If they practice it over and over and over again, they're going to be able to say those words better. That's what the whole thing is about. It's practice and repetition. All right? So that was how we started. We had new words whenever he got pretty good at the old ones. Eventually, we expanded to CVC words, to other word structures, longer words, putting 2 words together. And we were able to move him through that process of learning to speak, but still having his AAC as a backup. All right? Okay, so that's Ahmad's story. I think I hit everything. Let me make sure. Yeah, I think we hit it. Okay, questions from the hub. Those of you who are listening live in the hub, welcome. There's a bunch of you. Let me know what questions you have, or if you've had similar kiddos at the preschool level, or questions about any of that. While I'm waiting to see if there's any questions, I do want to make a quick announcement. I have started working today on a book. I'm going to write a book. I have written a few ebooks before, but this one's going to be print on demand, so you will actually be able to get a physical copy of this book. And I'm super excited because I am fashioning this after the Choose Your Own Adventure books from my childhood, like the Goosebumps book. Does anybody remember those? Where you read and then it says, okay, are you going to do this or this? And you turn to a different page depending on what you choose. But we're going to do a Choose Your Own Adventure book for the framework, for the SLK framework. And so it's going to be a quick start guide to figuring out how to help a child with speech and language delays, even if you don't know where to start, because it's going to walk you through. So you'll be reading it, it'll say, okay, is the child doing this or this? And you'll turn to that page, and then you'll read some more, and it'll say, okay, now is it this or this? And you'll make those choices until you get down to, okay, here's what you do to help. Here's the actual thing, right? So I'm super excited about this. I just started outlining it today. Hopefully it will just go swimmingly, and I'll have it to you guys very shortly, but we will see how my attention works because I have ADHD, so keep that in mind. Cami says, congratulations on your new book. Thank you. Okay, what other CV words did you use with Ahmad? All right, I am going to see if I can do this. I'm going to pull up our list, our therapy plan for CV words so that you can see. I can't talk and click. So that you can see the ones that we have. So if you come down to functional communication, we are inside the hub. So if you go to hub.speechandlanguagekids.com. Okay. So if you have to have the paid plan to be able to access this, but you come down to this section, speaking CV, VC, and CVC words, and I've broken them out into sets. And so you can click on the kit, and it'll show you the workbook. Come on, let's get down there. So it starts with imitating actions. If you have a child who can't imitate speech yet, that can be really helpful. And then sound effects. And then individual sounds. Okay, so here are O words. We've got no, go, and whoa. Whoa is a fun one. Lots to do with whoa. E words, we got me, see, and we. We've got boo, you, too. Hi, bye, my. And now we will move on to some vowel consonants. So we've got eat, out, up, in, on, off. And then we move on to our CVC words. So you can see that's a good list of the CV and VC words that you could use that are functional, that you can use in very functional activities. And you can see this kit actually gives you activities for different games and play activities you can do with those words so that you can help them and how to cue them and prompt them through that as well. Okay. Micah says you mentioned regular sessions with you. Can you talk about how you structured those? Push in, pull out, child-led, pre-planned activities. Did you target the same word list that was next to his backpack that week? Yes. So I was practicing those same words, and it was this kind of stuff, these games and activities where I would use. All right, I apologize. The microphones are being wonky today, but hopefully this will last. We're almost done here. So the question was, can you talk about how you structured the sessions? So these were pull-out sessions that I was doing in a separate room, and I did work on the same words that we were working on in his word list that's next to the backpack, but I did that through play, right? And so I would have a play activity where we had lots of opportunities to model and provide communication temptations for those words. So you can see in that therapy plan here that these were words that were very, very easy to work into those play activities, and that's what we would do. Does that make sense? Thanks. Yeah, you're welcome. Awesome. Great questions, guys. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so I think I'm going to wrap it up. But yeah, hang out in the hub. Come check that out. You can see what the different therapy plans and pathways we have in there are. Like I said, we've got that motor speech pathway, and we have a ton of stuff on AAC, so check that out as well.
And then, of course, you can come into the discussion board and ask questions, and that is available on the free plan. So you can come over to hub.speechandlanguagekids.com, grab that free plan, and then you can pop in there and ask those questions. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me today on the Speech and Language Kids podcast. I hope to see you inside the hub, and we'll see you next week for more podcast episodes on something. I can't remember what, but it's going to be good. All right. You guys have a great day. We'll see you later. Bye.